Hi, I'm Kimberly Cosby, an educator with 14 years teaching experience. Today we will be discussing the Alabama Code of Ethics. It is important that you get a full understanding of the Alabama Code of Ethics. Schools and school systems are responsible for ensuring that all educators and other school employees who have contact with children are familiar with and act in accordance with the Alabama Educator Code of Ethics. This presentation is intended for all certified, professional, or temporary educators in the state of Alabama, instructional and administrative certificate holders, as well as new applicants for Alabama certificates. At the conclusion of this presentation, you will understand the Alabama Code of Ethics and be able to apply these codes to your daily profession in education. You may ask yourself, what's the purpose of having a code of ethics? The purpose of the Alabama Code of Ethics is to encourage educators to show professional conduct such as trustworthiness. The primary goal of every educator must at all times be to provide an environment in which all students can learn. In order to accomplish that goal, educators must value the worth and dignity of every person, must have a devotion to excellence in all matters, and must actively support the pursuit of knowledge. The Alabama Educator Code of Ethics defines the professional behavior of educators in Alabama and serves as a guide to ethical conduct. The code protects the health, safety, and general welfare of students and educators. It also outlines objective standards of conduct for professional educators and clearly defines actions of an unethical nature for which disciplinary sanctions are justified. The codes are broken down into 9 standards, which we will be discussing during this presentation. Standard 1, professional conduct. Standard 2, trustworthiness. Standard 3, unlawful acts. Standard 4, teacher-student relationship. Standard 5, alcohol, drug, and tobacco use or possession. Standard 6, public funds and property. Standard 7, remunerative conduct. Standard 8, maintenance of confidentiality. And Standard 9, abandonment of contract. Standard 1, professional conduct. An educator should demonstrate conduct that follows generally recognized professional standards, which means you should be participating in ongoing professional development individually and collaboratively to promote student learning. You should be encouraging and supporting your colleagues in maintaining high standards. You should not be harassing your coworkers, using inappropriate language, getting into physical altercations, or not supervising your students. You definitely shouldn't be misusing, or mismanaging test materials like the ACT Aspire or any other tests. Standard 2, trustworthiness. An educator should exemplify honesty and integrity in the course of professional practice. There's nothing better than building a sense of trust among your students and colleagues. Make sure you're properly representing facts concerning an educational matter. You want to model good examples of honesty, diplomacy, tact, and fairness. Be an advocate for fair and equitable opportunities for all children. If you're not trustworthy, you're falsifying misrepresenting, omitting, or erroneously reporting information about your background, evaluation of students, or your reason for being absent from work. Standard 3. Unlawful acts. An educator should abide by federal, state, and local laws and statutes. Now, this is pretty straightforward. Don't break any laws that will result in the commission or conviction of a felony or of any crime involving moral turpitude. That includes, but is not limited to, theft, privacy violations, drugs, student relationships, any inappropriate relationships. Obey the law. Standard 4. Teacher-student relationship. An educator should always maintain a professional relationship with all students, both in and outside the classroom. It's perfectly fine to be a student's advocate, mentor, or confidant. Educators should nurture the intellectual, physical, emotional, social, and civic potential of all students. It's also important to create a supporting and challenging learning environment for students and keep them out of situations that make them feel embarrassed. Educators should not be committing acts of physical or verbal abuse, putting students in dangerous situations, soliciting sex or a relationship with students, or furnishing tobacco, alcohol, or illegal unauthorized drugs to any student, or allowing a student to consume alcohol or illegal drugs. Some ways to proactively address potentially inappropriate relationships are: remain professional with students at all times. Don't spend any alone time with students in inappropriate settings. Do not become Facebook, Instagram, or Snapchat friends with your students. If you have to second guess yourself, don't do it. Notify the principal immediately if you are being approached by students inappropriately. Last but not least, read your code of ethics policy. Standard 5. Alcohol, drug, and tobacco use or possession. An educator should refrain from the use of alcohol and or tobacco during the course of professional practice and should never use illegal or unauthorized drugs. Educators should make students aware of the dangers of alcohol, tobacco, and illegal drug use and abuse. At no time should you be under the influence of, possessing, using, or consuming illegal or unauthorized drugs. Educators should not be on school premises or at a school-related activity involving students while documented as being under the influence of, possessing, or consuming alcoholic beverages or using tobacco. Just in case you were wondering about a school-related activity, that does include club trips, field trips, any activities where students are involved. Standard 6. Public funds and property. An educator entrusted with public funds and property should honor that trust with a high level of honesty, accuracy, and responsibility. Educators should be maximizing the positive effect of school funds through judicious use of said funds and modeling for students and colleagues the responsible use of public property. Unethical use of public funds and property means you are misusing public or school-related funds, failing to account for funds collected from students or parents, submitting fraudulent requests for reimbursement of expenses or for pay, commingling public or school-related funds with your own personal funds or checking accounts, using school property without the approval of the local board of education or governing body. So, in a nutshell, you can't take your field trip money and use some of it to pay your bills. Standard 7. Remunerative conduct. An educator should maintain integrity with students, colleagues, parents, patrons, or businesses when accepting gifts, gratuities, favors, and additional compensation. Ethical conduct includes, but is not limited to, ensuring that instructional privileges are not used for personal gain, ensuring that school policies or procedures are not impacted by gifts or gratuities from any person or organization. Unethical conduct includes, but is not limited to, educators should not be soliciting students or parents of students to purchase equipment, supplies, or services from the educator, or to participate in activities that financially benefit the educator unless approved by the local governing body, or accepting gifts from vendors or potential vendors for personal use or gain where there appears to be a conflict of interest. Also, you shouldn't be tutoring students assigned to you for compensation unless approved by the local board of education. Standard 8. Maintenance of confidentiality. An educator should comply with state and federal laws and local school board policies relating to confidentiality of student and personnel records, standardized test material, and other information covered by confidentiality agreements. It's very important to keep in confidence information about students that has been obtained in the course of professional service unless disclosure serves professional purposes or is required by law. Also, maintaining diligently the security of standardized tests, supplies, and resources. Once you pick up your tests, you are solely responsible for their security. Do not let them out of your sight. Make sure that you're not sharing confidential information concerning student academic and disciplinary records, health and medical information, family status, income, and assessment testing results, unless disclosure is required or permitted by law. Violating confidentiality agreements related to standardized testing, including copying or teaching identified test items, publishing or distributing test items or answers, discussing test items, and violating local school system or state directions for the use of tests or test items. Standard 9. Abandonment of contract. An educator should fulfill all of the terms and obligations detailed in the contract with the local board of education or educational agency for the duration of the contract. Make sure that you do the full term of your contract or follow the proper procedures for an early release from your employer. What are the guidelines for reporting an ethics violation? I'm glad you asked. Educators are required to report a breach of one or more of the standards in the Alabama Educator Code of Ethics as soon as possible, but no later than 60 days from the date the educator became aware of the alleged breach, unless the law or local procedures require reporting sooner. Complaints filed with the local state school boards or with the State Department of Education, teacher certification section must be filed in writing and must include the original signature of the complaint. Administrative Code 290-3-2-.05 states that each superintendent shall submit to the state superintendent within 10 calendar days of the decision the name and social security number of each employee holding an Alabama certificate or license who is terminated or non-renewed, resigns, or is placed on administrative leave for cause, and shall indicate the reason for such action. What is the disciplinary action for ethics violation? Disciplinary action shall be defined as the issuance of a reprimand or warning, or the suspension, revocation, or denial of certificates. Certificate refers to any teaching, service, or leadership certificate issued by the authority of the Alabama State Department of Education. Alabama Administrative Code 290-3-2-.22 assigns authority of the superintendent of education to revoke a certificate, to suspend a certificate, or to deny the issuance of a new certificate. Any of the following grounds shall also be considered cause for disciplinary actions: unethical conduct as outlined in the Alabama Educator Code of Ethics, Standards 1 through 9, order from a court of competent jurisdiction, violation of any other laws or rules applicable to the profession, any other good and sufficient cause. Any individual whose certificate has been revoked, denied, or suspended may not be employed as an educator, paraprofessional, aide, or substitute teacher during the period of his or her revocation, suspension, or denial. Alabama ethics violation cases. Here are 6 of the many ethics violation cases in Alabama. Ethics complaint filed against superintendent, Decatur High School. Teacher's indictment allows requestioning of law's constitutionality. Police, Alabama teacher gave grades for sex, had criminal past. Alabama Attorney General, U.S. Department of Education, OIG, announced arrest of former State Department of Education official and spouse for felony ethics charges. Former teacher indicted on theft, ethics violation charges. Former director of federal programs for Alabama Department of Education arrested today on felony ethics charges. You can click on each link to read the full article explaining each ethics violation. This is the end of my presentation. I hope that you have learned some helpful information. If you follow these ethics standards, there is nothing but success at the end of your educational journey. Aim high and stay focused.